Hey legends, welcome along to Sceammeupbotty. I am your host, Rodney Stewart, and we're getting into Star Trek the original series in this episode. This is Season 1, Episode 16, the Galileo 7. I love this episode because it gives you a little bit of a different perspective on Spock and his personality and what he's willing to do in the heat of the moment to get his crew safely back to the Enterprise. This is basically his first attempt at command, really. At the beginning of the episode, the Enterprise is en route to Marcus Free to deliver medical supplies that are meant to be going to the new Paris colony. And on the way there, they come close to a formation in space, quasar-like formation that is identified as Murasaki 312. And Kirk has standing orders that mean that he has to stop off and study this. And he sends a science team composed of Spock in command of it. Dr. McCoy's with him, Scotty is there too, Yeoman Mears, and three other specialists, Boma, Gaetano, and Latimer. I want to say, I've maybe mispronounced a couple of those names, I don't think I have. But they head out in the shuttlecraft Galileo to investigate and scan the formation, but they're no sooner out of the launch bay of the Enterprise they hit a little bit of trouble, and the ship is pulled off course. They lose control, and Spock is doing his best to, get an emergency landing on a planet on there. They end up on a planet called TOS 2, and it's, your basic alien planet for Star Trek. It's all desolate and rock and a lot of mist and fog there, and it's dead centre of Murasaki 312. They're completely cut off. When the ship was losing control, they were trying to contact the Enterprise to tell them that they were off course, but the communication came in garbled. It was just too much interference from this quasar formation, and Uhura was only getting a few little words here and there. It was just enough for them to realise that the ship was in trouble and it was off course. And the other problem that they have in this is there's a Commissioner Ferris on board the Enterprise, and he's pretty much there to oversee this delivery of medical supplies to the new Paris colony. So he's there throughout the entire episode. He's getting on Kirk's back. You're wasting time checking out this quasar formation. We need to get these supplies there in a hurry for whatever transfer needs to happen on on Marcus Free. But Kirk says, okay, it's 5 days out. It's going to take, altogether it's going to take 5 days for the transfer to happen. It's only 3 days for us to get there, so we've got 2 days to check out this phenomena. If you get that reference, you're an absolute legend. So Kirk is stuck between a rock and a hard place here. He's under orders to check out this stuff if he comes across it in his missions, and he's got this commissioner that's on his back because he wants to get off to get these supplies to where they need to go. And now that the Galileo is lost inside the system, and it's flipping huge. I believe they compared it to 4 solar systems or something, or 4 planetary systems, or the way Kirk said it. But he's it's like searching for a needle in a haystack would be child's play compared to the challenges ahead of us to find the ship and the crew. On the surface, crew members Latimer and Gaetano, they're scouting the area, and they eventually encounter the native inhabitants of the planet that are giant ape-like creatures. They're flipping huge, and it's there's a few shots in there where one of the team members gets attacked by one of these creatures later on, and it's just like a big guy in a huge fur coat. But some creative filming in this episode makes these creatures, like, very rarely are they. There's only that one shot where this creature's coming in to grab this guy, but it's a smaller version of what they really should be. They're like 12 feet tall, but it doesn't really come off so much whenever you see an actor and this so-called creature, which is a big guy in a fur coat, coming towards them. But any of the other encounters they have with these creatures, they're the crew of the Galileo, the Starfleet officers, are never on screen at the same time as these creatures. So you'll see they attack using giant spears and giant shields, and at times you'll see them chucking these spears at the Enterprise crew. But whenever you cut to the spear landing beside the Enterprise crew, it's a bigger version of the spear that you see the creature throwing originally, and it gives the effect of these things are flipping massive. So it's nicely done for its time. Like, you need to think, this episode, the original air date for it was way back in January the 5th, 1967. So it's tasty. Like, I enjoy the original series so much. But yeah, Gaetano, Latimer come across these creatures, and Latimer is killed by one of the spears, and Gaetano, he drives the other creature away using his phaser. They return to the Galileo only to discover that the creatures seem to be preparing for an organised attack, and despite objections from the others, Spock chooses to he tries to use the phasers to, he's Starfleet through and through. He's logical to a fault in this episode, and it's his duty and his mind to deal with these creatures without the use of physical violence if he can manage it. So he's trying his best to do this in the first, or the second encounter with the creature. So he's using the phaser fire to try and frighten the creatures instead of killing them, and it definitely, as I say, logical to a fault. That's a big miscalculation in this episode, and Gaetano was killed in this attack. Back up in the Enterprise, Kirk searches is trying his best to find the shuttle, despite concerns from Commissioner Ferris. As I said, he's just impatient. He's like, we need to get the Marcus free, and he's pretty much there as a human stopwatch in this episode. Every time you see him, he's constantly bitching and moaning about the time being wasted, and you've only got so many hours and whatnot, and he's doing the countdown the way through the episode. Kirk dispatches the shuttlecraft Columbus to search the planet from orbit, and search parties are eventually started to be transported to the surface. There's that much interference and whatnot, like the ship's sensors, like all their normal ways of trying to find things is just not working in this episode. So it's pretty much like shuttlecrafts beaming people to the surface, but the interference and whatnot was taking out the transporters and everything, and it takes a good part of the episode to they get the transporters working well enough that they can actually send people down to the planet. One of the landing parties returns to the ship with casualties and reports have been attacked by large furry creatures. Back on the planet, between attacks by the primitive giants and quarrels amongst themselves, the crew attempt to make repairs to the shuttle. most of the conventional fuel has been lost, and they attempt to do like a bypass to use whatever remaining fuel they have. There's a lot of science talk on these shows where it's just they've written a script. A mate of mine was determined to tell me at one point that a lot of the stuff that happens in this show is everything is scientifically possible. They'll not put anything in Star Trek it can be scientifically done, which is true to a certain extent. But I've watched documentaries and stuff over the years of Star Trek, and they very clearly said, and I think it was a documentary on the Next Generation, we've got a script here, and they'll get to a certain point, and then there'll be like brackets, and it's like, make it sound sciencey. So they'll just come up with something to the writers, and they'll come up with a creative way of making it sound scientific and something that actually really, really works in the real world, no matter how far out of the solar system it is. But so they managed to screw up that whatever bypass Scotty was trying to do means they lost the last of their traditional fuel. Mr. Scotty himself, he comes up with the idea of adapting the phasers to power the ship. His repairs are eventually successful, but Boma will not leave without giving Gaetano and Latimer a proper burial. See, one of the big problems they had trying to get the ship off the ground again was there was too much excess weight for the fuel that they had there, so they had to get rid of the equivalent of free, fully grown people. So they strip out whatever they can from the ship. The unfortunate thing is that everything that's on board a Federation shuttlecraft is there for a reason, so there's very little that you can get rid of. There's points in the episode where we're going to have to choose to leave 3 people behind. There's a lot of fighting between Boma and Spock, and of course Gaetano and Latimer about how much of a robot Spock can be. And Spock's like, I'm the commanding officer, and there's a lot of fighting, confrontations about this in the episode, and he's adamant that I'm the commander of this mission, and if it comes down to it, I'll choose logically who'll be left behind. And it's a real moment for Spock in this episode where he has to really look at himself in a way that he, at this point, hasn't looked at himself before. Now, this will probably change with Strange New Worlds and whatnot. The new shows coming out, we're going to get obviously at this point in the run of the new shows, we're getting a bit of more of an emotional Spock. He's not just as buttoned up, let's just say, as the original Spock. But for now, in the timeline of the original series, this seems to be the first time where he's really confronted with, is my logic going to fail me in this mission? So I love the episode for that. So this guy Boma wants to give a proper burial to Gaetano and Latimer. Spock didn't, him being the commanding officer, they put it to him that he had to, in his role of a commander, he has to be the one to speak some words over the burial. And he kind of avoids doing it earlier in the episode because logically he should be there trying to get the ship sorted to get off the planet. But, throughout the episode, eventually Spock starts to come around a little bit. He goes off on his own at one point to find one of the members and bring his body back. At the coming up towards the end of the episode, the burial of these guys, Spock, he advises against it, but Boma, he's, you know, really on his face about it. And Spock responds by allowing the funeral, and during the ceremony, you don't get to see much of that. Like, they're just at one point, they're outside the ship, and they're about to get these guys planted. The creatures attack again, and Spock is pinned down by a boulder, and he's ordering them to leave at this point, try and get the ship off the ground. Off you go. McCoy and Boma run out to free him. Despite all their differences in the episodes, Boma puts his own safety to the side to help Spock. As much as they disagree, they're still Federation members at the end of the day, shipmates, and they'll look after themselves. Yes, Spock manages to get the Galileo off the ground by using the shuttle's boosters. There's a moment earlier too, I should say, where he used the shuttle's power cells to electrify the outside of the ship. These creatures were attacking the ship, and they managed to use some of the power to not hurt them, but drive them off once more. But come up towards the end here, they get into a real fix when he's forced to use the boosters to get the ship off the ground. And now it has next to near no fuel to escape the planet's gravity, or even get to a stable orbit. So they're going to get up there in the hopes that the Enterprise might find them. But as they're taking off, as they get up to as best an orbit as they can, Spock realizes that the Enterprise will be underway at this point, and he's accurate that their time has run out. The Commissioner has forced Kirk to leave them behind at the end of the episode, and Kirk does obey those orders, but he leaves at just a nice little pace. He's not going to warp or anything. He's just just go out of there like impulse power, and to give himself more time, essentially, to keep an eye on the planet for as long as he can. So as they're in orbit, having next to near no fuel, still no way to contact the Enterprise, Spock suddenly, in a moment that's completely the last thing you expect from Spock in this episode, he hits a switch to dump the fuel, and he ignites it, and the rest of the crew are looking at him like he's gone crazy, and McCoy is like having a moment to himself. He's like, I've lived long enough to see Spock doing something completely human, more or less. What Spock has done in this moment is dumping the fuel and igniting it. He has pretty much turned the shuttlecraft into a flare, which is seen by the Enterprise. Spock orders a reverse course, and just as at this point, they think all hope is lost on board the shuttle. Spock has rolled the last roll of the dice that he'd probably ever rolled. Like, they're facing death at any second because their orbit is now starting to decay, and the ship is starting to turn into a fireball as the Enterprise turns up. Thankfully, of course, they now have the transporters working, so they manage to beam the survivors back to the Enterprise, the 5 surviving members. And at the end of the episode, Kirk questions Spock, trying to get him to admit that his final action was motivated by emotion rather than logic. But Spock pretty much refuses to admit to that. But Kirk says, "Mr. Spock, you're a stubborn man, and Spock has no problem agreeing to that. And the end of the episode is pretty much the whole of the bridge crew bursting out into laughter, and it sort of ends off on a very, very cheesy note with that last scene. Nice little bit of humour there with Kirk and McCoy getting in and trying to give Spock a hard time because of how logical he normally is, and he went to just a place of complete desperation in the last moment there and dumped the fuel and fired it up. So it was highly emotional, but of course he's not going to admit to that. But the laughing at the end of the episode was a little bit over the top, but it's a tasty show. It's a great show. I absolutely love the original series of Star Trek. I'm dying to get on and do these podcasts on a regular basis of the shows. Like, pretty much, like, I don't think there's an episode of the original series that I haven't seen, but I grew up watching it in reruns and whatnot, and of course it's been online for ages now, and every time there's a channel here in the UK, Legend, that's actually showing the original series at the moment, along with, well, Next Generation. A lot of the older, well, the later shows have been shown as well. So, you know, pretty much every time I turn on the television, chances are Star Trek will be on there. So I've seen every episode, I'm pretty sure. I don't think there's anything I've ever missed in the original series. But one show that I know, as far as the classic stuff goes, that I haven't seen every episode of, and probably about 30% of them, that is Star Trek, the animated series that came out, you know, like a follow-up to the original series. So that box set is sitting right here in front of me now. I'm dying to get into that there, but it's going to be a while, because, you know, it's one episode a week, essentially, that we're doing here for each series that we're working on at the moment. So it's going to take quite a bit of time to get there, but as I've said before, I'm in here for the long haul, and, you know, it's going to take years probably. There's no probably about it at this point. Even at 3 episodes a week, it's going to take years to get through all the Star Trek that's out there, and I'm loving it. And eventually this series will, or this podcast will, venture away from Star Trek. Whenever we manage to exhaust every episode ever made of Star Trek, we're going to branch out into all our science fiction shows. So I don't intend to finish this podcast anytime soon. There may be big breaks here and there due to a bit of burnout, but and it's happened a couple of times. That's why there wasn't many episodes up here for a few months. Spinning too many plates at the one time, and when you do that shit, that's only a matter of time before, if you don't take the breaks you need to take and the rest you need to take, it's only a matter of time before your body decides, right, here, numbnuts, I'm going to shut your body down for you and force you to get a bit of rest. So, tasty little episode of Star Trek. Absolutely adored. Next podcast up, we'll be back to season 1 of Picard, and then of course we'll be bouncing off Discovery one more time, and then the original series one more time. So we're 2 episodes of the new shows in a week and 1 episode of the classic shows in the week. Yeah, it is what it is, guys. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Until the next one, stay safe, and I'll talk to you all then. This has been a production of Coins Age Media. Thank you so much for listening.